Welcome to Study Abroad, Smart and Simple, brought to you by ApplyWave.com.
Welcome, students and educators, to our Study Abroad tips from ApplyWave.com. We're here with Mackenzie and Lisa again. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us again. And last week, we talked about the new online experience that is challenging both schools and students. But this week, we want to talk and chat about the classic study abroad experience, focusing on the USA, kind of the classic Coke, right? I don't know if you all remember classic Coke, but the traditional Coke, the traditional classic Coke that's out there, that's the USA, which is still one of the top destinations in the world. Now, Mackenzie, you're from the USA. Where did you go to university?
Yeah, so I am from Ohio in the U.S. It's in part of the Midwest region up north, and I studied at Ohio University.
And what was the experience like for you?
Just like what you see in the movies.
Oh, really? Now, which movie? Which movie? There's many movies out there for U.S. universities.
There was probably bits and pieces from every college movie you can imagine thrown into my experience.
Right.
That's the truth.
What do you think for international students coming to the USA? What is the biggest challenge that they face going to college or university?
Well, the structure in the U.S. is a little bit different than it is at, other universities in different countries. I know kind of the U.S. education system is its own animal. So maybe adjusting to that can be a challenge. And there's also a lot of freedom in the U.S. university experience. So some might see that as a benefit, but some might also struggle with that a little bit. But yeah, I think those would probably be the main things.
I think one of the big challenges every student has transitioning from high school to college or university is, what am I going to take? Which program? And in the USA, you can take any program you want. Mm-hmm. How do they decide what program and which university and, all of these elements?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As far as what program you're going to study, the good news is if you're going to study in the U.S., you don't really need to know what you want to study, at least the first year. So when you start university in the U.S., you're basically, for that full first year, you're taking general education courses. So, the classic like Psych 101, Business 101, the 101 courses are kind of all the basic level. So that first year, you kind of have these general courses that you have to take from each of the different disciplines. So like arts and sciences, humanities, et cetera, et cetera. And in that time, it's really nice because you get to kind of figure out what interests you more. So you kind of have that full first year where you can maybe start with an idea like, oh, I want to be a business major. But then as you take your Psych 101 class, you realize, okay, I'm actually really interested in psychology. So then you can always switch your major at that point. So I know a lot of students get really stressed out thinking about that. And I think it's because in other countries, you have like a very structured study plan for the whole degree. But in the US, it's not like that. So you don't really need to know.
Yeah, and I didn't really decide my future till probably about year 3 of university, and which it changed anyways after I graduated.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of people. Like I'm doing nothing with my major right now.
What was your major?
That's a good question. And this just goes to show how flexible it is. So I started as a double major between Spanish language and Spanish education. So I wanted to be a Spanish teacher. That was my original goal. So yeah, that's another cool thing. In the US, you can double major, like you can choose two. So that's how I started off. I ended up dropping the education major, I think in my second year, and just ended up graduating with my Spanish major.
But now you're in education.
Yeah, it's weird. Funny how life works.
I can tell you, I went to university for radio and television. How about that? And
makes sense.
30 years later, I finally got my first radio job.
There you go.
There you go. So it took a long time, and I was in education in between. Now, what's the difference between public and private? There's public university, there's private, and Ivy League university. I mean, do I need to go to Harvard? Is that necessary?
No. You do not need to go to Harvard to get a good education. Obviously, Harvard and Stanford and Yale, obviously they have their pros of going to those schools. And I know those are the names that a lot of students have heard of. And they feel like if you're going to study in the US, that's where you have to go. But the truth is, it's really, really hard to get into those schools. And if you do get into those schools, you're going to have a very, very rigorous academic plan set out for you. So if you want to be, a super important scientist or engineer or something like that, yeah, strive for it. It never hurts to apply. But if you don't go to those schools, that doesn't mean you're not going to get a good education. You asked about public versus private. So I feel like there's a lot of misconception around this topic. Some students may think, well, I need to go to a private school because a private school is going to be better than a public school. And that's just not true. So a lot of times, maybe not all the time, but my understanding is that the distinction of public versus private, all it has to do with is where the funding for the institution comes from. So like state schools, for example, public schools, maybe they're part of a group and they all have to, maintain these certain standards or structures. And it just means that all of their coursework is maybe similar, where a private institution maybe has more flexibility in their structure, their admissions requirements. So there's really no difference, again, as far as like quality of education between public versus private.
Yeah. And I think very importantly, students, if you are out there deciding which courses to take or which program to join, it's the quality of the program. Because yes, Harvard has the brand name, but it doesn't mean that it has the best program in whatever you want to take. There may be other schools that you do not know of that have some absolutely amazing programs and smaller programs. I know of schools that have 2+2 years where they study in one country and then they can do another 2 years in another country. And it's an amazing program. So researching what you're interested in and looking at all of the different program options is very, very, very important.
Yeah. And I actually get a lot of questions about rankings in the US because I know that's also something students are concerned with. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, I get a lot of students where they're like, well, if I'm going to study, I want to be in a top 10 school. Do you know how many higher education institutions there are in the US?
How many are there? Yeah.
It's something like between 6,000 to 7,000 higher education institutions in the US. So imagine if you want to be at a school in the top 10, first of all, there's going to be a very high price tag. I can guarantee it. And it's going to be very difficult to get in. But again, like you said, you have to look at the program because there are institutional rankings. So maybe the university as a whole has this ranking. And then there are program rankings. So for example, I can throw it out there. There's a school in Ohio called Kent State University. And I don't know where they fit on the scale as far as an institution, what their institutional ranking is. But Kent State is not a very well-known school abroad. However, they have I think it's the number 2 fashion design program in the US, a school in Ohio. Who would think about that? So you really need to research if ranking is important to you. Exactly. You need to research the program. In my school, for example, Ohio University, it has, I think when I was there, it had the number 1 journalism program in the US. So yeah, it's all across the board. You have to do your research.
And I can attest, Mackenzie is very fashionable, and she's from Ohio. So there must be a connection. It's an Ohio thing. Now, Lisa, you had a question for Mackenzie. You had a ranking question about freshmen and sophomore. Go ahead.
So since I have never been to the US in my life and I have no idea how their system works at all, I've always wondered what is a freshman? What is a sophomore? How does that work? Can you tell me how the ranking?
Give us a vocabulary lesson. Yeah. This is very American.
Yeah. Honestly, I have no clue where that came from. like the whole freshman thing, but we also use it in high school. So, high school for us is 4 years, and then university to get your bachelor's degree, it's also 4 years. So freshman is a first year student. And again, that applies to both high school first year and university first year. It's a freshman. The second year is a sophomore. Third year is a junior, and the fourth year is a senior. And the funny thing is, in university, some people take a little bit longer to graduate. So if they have to take like a fifth year, we call them a super senior.
Oh, super seniors. All right. Yeah. Okay. That's good.
I don't know why we came up with that. And there are nicknames too. Like sometimes, I don't know if this is what the kids still call it, but back in my day, we had a nickname for freshmen, and we would call them Frosh.
I don't know. Frosh, yes. Yeah. I think the Frosh are still out there. And they would have Frosh Week. Students, you gotta go to Frosh Week. Frosh Week is orientation, but there's a lot of fun games and fun activities, and you get to meet all of the people in very unusual circumstances. For example, in my Frosh Week, we had to drive through the drive-through at McDonald's with no car. And so that was pretty embarrassing. So, fun things like that where you bond very quickly.
Oh, yeah. When I did mine, so when I was in my Frosh Week, or we called it Welcome Week, I think maybe they thought the term Frosh was a little harsh, so they called it Welcome Week. And we had to learn a dance, which is called the Dougie. I don't know if anybody remembers that song.
Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars talks about that.
Yeah, so we all had to stand in a room and have these people teach us how to Dougie, and then we had to do it. It was interesting. But, that's how you make friends.
Now Lisa, you did that online. Did you do the Dougie online?
Unfortunately not.
Okay. Do you want to do the Dougie online?
It sounds fun. I have to admit that.
Okay.
Now everybody does TikTok. It was like the TikTok back in the day.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so while we're on vocabulary, one more question I have: why is a university and a college the same thing in the United States? In Canada, of course, where I'm broadcasting from, a university is 4 years and a college is 2 years. But in America, it's the same. Why?
Oh, wow, James, you asked me a tough one. I really, really wish I had a clear-cut answer for that. I mean, you'll see 4-year institutions that some have the name university and some have the name college, and they're both 4-year institutions. And just to give you an example, again, remember, I went to Ohio University, but when I'm talking to someone, I say, I went to college at Ohio University.
Yes, yes.
I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know if going to college is the verb that we use for going
This
to
is American English, everybody. This is American English, yes.
Yeah, right. and then obviously there are community colleges, which they can be referred to as either community college or junior college, and those are 2-year institutions.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the U.S., you can start in a community college for 2 years, for example, and then transfer to a university for 2 years, correct?
Exactly. A lot of students do that. There are a few different reasons why. One of them being money. So a lot of times community colleges are a little bit less expensive than universities. So if they're trying to save money, they start there and then transfer to a university. Sometimes students do that because they don't have very good grades. So maybe in high school, they struggle, didn't get good test scores, but they still obviously want to have higher education. So they'll start at a community college because the requirements are a little bit lower. And then, they take a few courses, get their grades up, and then transition to a university. So you actually don't have to go to a community college for the full 2 years. Sometimes you just go for a semester and you get your grades up and then you can transfer right away. So it's just kind of like a stepping stone to university if you're not ready to go directly into that university.
Now, for sports players out there, people who are looking for a sports scholarship, one thing that I heard about community colleges is it's kind of a training ground for the universities where they go to 2 years and train with maybe a coach, and then that coach will recommend them to different top level university programs. Is that correct?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the show Last Chance U on Netflix?
No, I haven't.
So it's a docuseries, and it addresses exactly this topic. So basically what can happen is, if you are a college athlete, or you have the dreams of being a college athlete, the lucky ones, they get recruited, they get to play at their university. That's great. But sometimes those same lucky students who get recruited and are playing at a Division I school, great program, maybe they don't maintain the grades that they have to maintain and they get kicked off the team. So, or maybe a student athlete doesn't end up getting recruited to their dream school. So what they do, a lot of times they go to these community colleges that have strong athletic programs. And a lot of these D1 or Division I universities, they recruit directly from those community colleges. So they'll go and watch the games, and, it's a good stepping stone for those athletes to either get their level up a little bit, get some more experience playing on a new team, or get their grades up so that way they're eligible to participate in the athletics at a bigger university.
Lisa, you have a comment.
Yeah, just to be jumping in here, is it true that Americans are so obsessed with the student athletes that they get a priority? They get full scholarships all the time. That's the rumors going around in Europe, that you're you don't have to be that smart. You just need to be good at some sport, like football. Is that true?
Yes and no, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I'm speaking from my experience. So yeah, athletics in the US are the blood and the air of the university. So I don't know why we're so obsessed with sports, but to us, university sports are more important almost than professional sports.
It is true. It is so true. Let me tell you my story here quickly, and then I'll let you finish your thought and explain what's going on in the US, because this is crazy. I went down, my son was 12 years old, and we went to a baseball tournament in the US. And they told us the baseball park is behind the school. So in Canada, if you say that, the baseball park is just a fence with a couple of benches. That's it. It's very simple. It's behind the school. We understand. We arrived at the baseball park. There were lights. There were stands, there was announcers, scoreboards, there was huge dugouts, there was a beautiful field. It was professional. These were for 12-year-old baseball players, and there wasn't one, Lisa, there were 4 baseball fields all connected into one huge resort. And then there was a tiny little school. There was a tiny little school off to the side. And I went, wow, this is incredible. And I've seen it with football fields. I've seen it with baseball fields. It's unbelievable. Why, Mackenzie? Explain it to us.
We just love sports. I don't know. We just really, really love sports. And I think it generates a sense of community and a sense of belonging. And that's why when you talk to someone from the US who went to a US school, they're so passionate about their institution, and a lot of that is because of the sports teams. It gives us an identity. I don't know, but we're like that in high school too. Athletics are also super important to us in high school, and we have the school teams and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's kind of crazy, I guess, from the outside looking in, but for us, it's just normal.
And Saturday is football, right?
Yeah. Yep. Well, it depends, but yeah, usually it's on Saturday. When you're in high school, though, it's Friday night football. University, it's Saturday. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think where Lisa came in with her question about the scholarships and all of that, there are a lot of athletes that go on scholarship. And I think it's a misconception for some international students. They think if I'm going to go to the US, I'm going to go on a sports scholarship. Easier said than done. In order to to get an athletic scholarship, you have to be really, really good at your sport. And the reason why, like you brought up, James, the facilities are amazing. And that's because the athletic programs bring in a lot of money for the universities. Because it's not just the students who go to the games, it's the community. People travel to come to those games that aren't students at the university. So I think it's a big moneymaker for the schools. And because of that, they're able to give larger scholarships to those student athletes who play there.
Yeah, and
they still, sorry?
Sorry, yeah, very important is to talk about partial scholarships, because I think people think they can get a full free ride scholarship, but oftentimes the university sports teams give partial scholarships. What does that mean? And not only the sports, but it could be music, it could be art. They give partial scholarships. What's a partial scholarship?
So a partial scholarship means that they're giving you a portion of the tuition. They're waiving a portion of the tuition. So maybe you'll get a 50% scholarship or a 25% scholarship. Whereas a full ride scholarship, you'll hear that term a lot, a full ride. A full ride scholarship typically includes the tuition and the cost of living. So your dorms, your meal plan, all of that. It's very rare to get a full ride scholarship. And I would kind of give a little recommendation for the international students who are interested in maybe looking for an athletic scholarship in the U.S. If you're a woman athlete, it's a lot easier to get those scholarships just because there aren't as many international female athletes that go out for those. There's a lot of male athletes that go out for the scholarships. So if you're a female athlete and if you play a sport that may not be the most common, like golf, for example, if you're a female golfer, it's going to be very, very likely that you'll get a large athletic scholarship. Whereas a male soccer player may have a harder time because he's competing against a lot more people to get that money.
Now let's get off sports for a second. I think we covered sports very well, but you can see the passion. You can hear the passion from Mackenzie when she's talking about sports and how important it is to the culture of the university life. Let's talk about the work opportunities and what is available. A lot of people come to the U.S. because they want to live and immigrate and find a job and work in Canada and in the U.S. How does that work? How does it work after university or during university? Can they work? Can they get a job after? What are the prospects?
So when an international student is studying in the U.S. at a university, your options are kind of limited. So based on the student visa in the U.S., you're not allowed to work off campus, but you can work part-time on campus. And that's typically what a lot of university students do anyway, both domestic and international. So like, for example, when I was in university, I worked at the rec center, at the gym, the university gym. So I was employed, and those jobs from the university, they have them set up for students. So they don't schedule you for more than 20 hours a week. And that's the maximum for international students.
Okay, I was going to ask that. Is there a limit? Because, same in Canada, it's 20 hours. So it's 20 hours.
Yep.
Okay. And is there a opportunity for co-op or internships?
Yeah, a lot of students, based on their program, if they're in business, engineering, there are a lot of co-op internship opportunities. Some schools have more than others. It really depends on the institution. So I would encourage students who do want to do some internship experience, they look for those programs that do offer that, because not every school has those facilities. But like if you're studying at a school that's in a big city or near a big city, it's a lot more likely that you'll be able to get an internship. And then there are certain programs as well, and we'll have to do an episode on this because I think I could go into a lot more detail about these work opportunities. But there are certain post-study opportunities that students can get as well, where they're able to extend their visa for like another 2 years to get real work experience after they finish their degree. But those laws are also kind of changing right now in the U.S., so I want to see what they come up with before I speak too much on that. But there are post-study work opportunities. There's just not a pathway to immigration. So that's important to keep in mind.
Right. Now, I think Lisa really wants to ask a question, a really important question.
let's get to the fun stuff.
About the fun stuff, right, Lisa? That's what we've been talking so seriously here. And Lisa's like falling asleep. She wants more fun. What do you want to ask about going to college or university, college university in the USA?
Something that all students or like future students want to know super badly. How is the frat party life? Like, like in the movies? Is it that funny? Is it that cool?
It is that funny.
Oh my gosh. It's actually, I mean, what can I say? It's a lot like what you see in the movies. So, I actually, when I was in college, I say college, even though
there you go. You went to university.
Yeah, when I was at university, that just makes it sound much more fancy. When I was in college, I was dating someone who was in a fraternity. So I went to a lot of frat parties. They were really fun.
What happened? What happens in those frat parties? I was never invited.
Well, there is a lot of alcohol, but remember in the US, the drinking age is 21 and up. So keep that in mind. But yeah, they're fun. I mean, a lot of them have themes. Sometimes like we would have tournaments like beer pong tournaments and those kinds of things. And the thing with like fraternities and sororities, they have kind of these like spirit weeks.
Okay, wait a minute. What's the difference between a fraternity and a sorority? Because you threw out some new vocabulary.
Yeah. So a fraternity, that is for the boys, and a sorority is for the girls.
And they all live together?
Yeah. Well, depending on the campus, some campuses don't have the same setup, but the traditional way is that there's a frat house for each fraternity where the frat brothers all live, and there's sorority house and all the sorority sisters live together. And there are a bunch of different fraternities and sororities that have all these like Greek names like Theta Chi and Delta Zeta and like all of that stuff. But yeah, they live together.
Lisa has more questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm interested in that. Is there like rituals that you have to fulfill in order to get in there? Like, is that real?
Oh, yeah. Good question.
How do you get in the fraternity?
Yeah, so they have like rush week, and I don't know. So I was not in a sorority. Just be aware, I wasn't in one personally, so I don't know all the ins and outs. I know they like to keep things very secret because a lot of these rituals, they're like traditions that are passed down from year to year to year. So some of it, they don't know. Like if you're not part of it, you don't know. Okay. But they do have like, they have rush week, and there's this whole thing about hazing, which is bad. Hazing is very bad, but they say there are these things that they have to do in order to be accepted. But on the lighter note, like a lot of the sororities, they have like little hand signals they always do. And, like your Zeta, it was like,
we can't see it. This is radio. We can't see what you're doing, but it's like, okay. She's making silly hand gestures, everybody. You do not want to see that. But anyway, okay.
Yeah. See, like I said, I was not in a sorority, so I'm not cool enough to know all the secrets. But
clearly, Mackenzie's not cool enough as we see her with her hand gestures. Yes, she's definitely got a problem.
But like I said, I was like a sister, or I forget the word for it. But since I was dating someone who was in a fraternity, I was like an honorary like member kind of thing. So I went to a lot of the events. Like they have formals where kind of like prom, where everybody dresses up and there's a party. I went to one in Gatlinburg, Tennessee once where, I had a date and it was a formal, but it was away in these cabins in Tennessee. So it was like a fun weekend thing where everybody
sounds like a horror movie.
No, it was fun. It could easily turn into a horror movie, but we had fun.
In the cabins in the woods in Tennessee.
No, it was fun. Fun times.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it was fun. There's a lot of memories flashing back.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Not many I will share here, but if anyone has questions, they can reach out to me.
If you get a chance to meet Mackenzie outside of the podcast, then you can ask her about the stories. Lisa, any more questions? Do you have any more questions for Mackenzie's dangerous university life that she's sharing with us?
I'm already planning to go study and do the master's or something. I'm already convinced.
You go.
I have to say though, if you are studying in the US, it really is like the classic experience. I had so much fun when I was in university. I would not change a single thing. And like, it's just It's just totally different than anything you've ever experienced before because you're on campus with all these people who are the same age as you. You're all figuring things out. For a lot of students, it's the first time they've had like freedom because a lot of, even in the US, a lot of people go away for university. So they don't study right where they live. They travel and they live at the dorm. So you really create this community around you and it's just fun. I mean, it's hard work. The courses are hard. You have to study, you have to maintain that balance, but it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun, everybody. And you can visit applywave.com and check out all of the different study abroad options for the USA. And we were talking about classic institutions and classic study abroad experience in the USA. Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, Lisa, for your insights on studying in the USA. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, James. And just one more little plug I want to put in there. I talked about Ohio University, which is where I went to school, and you can find Ohio University on ApplyWave.
All right, and you can live at Mackenzie's house. She will help you out. That's where we can. All right, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to visit applywave.com. Study abroad, smart and simple with ApplyWave.